The sun was merciless that afternoon, hanging low and white in the sky like an unblinking eye. It watched as a man lay broken in the dust, his blood darkening the sand beneath him, his breath coming in shallow, uneven pulls. Each inhale burned. Each exhale felt weaker than the last. Somewhere above, vultures circled lazily, patient creatures who understood one simple truth. Nothing survived long out here once it was left behind. The man knew it too. He had come to this land expecting many things. Death, it seemed, was the only one that had kept its promise. Elias Crowe lay on his side, one arm twisted beneath him, the other clutching his ribs where the bullet had torn through flesh. His hat was gone. His rifle lay several yards away, snapped clean in half beneath a horse's hoof. Nearby, his horse lay still, eyes glassy, flies already gathering at the corners of its mouth. The animal had gone down fast. Elias had not been so lucky. He tried to move. Pain exploded through his body, white and blinding. A low sound escaped his throat, half groan, half laugh. It was almost funny how quickly things ended out here. One moment, he'd been riding through open country, measuring land for a settlement that might never exist. The next, gunfire, shouts, faces wrapped in bandanas, greedy hands searching his saddlebags. Then the cold certainty of a gun barrel pressed to his chest, followed by the thunderous kick that sent him sprawling into the dirt. They hadn't even bothered to finish the job properly. Just one shot, one assumption that the desert would do the rest. A soft whimper pulled Elias's gaze away from the sky. Ash stood a few feet away, ribs heaving, ears pinned back. The dog's coat, once a deep charcoal, was matted with dust and streaked with Elias's blood. One eye was swollen shut, but the other never left him. Ash stepped closer, careful, as if afraid the ground itself might hurt his master if he moved too fast. "Don't," Elias rasped, though he wasn't sure why. The dog ignored him anyway, nudging his shoulder with a wet nose, then curling protectively against his chest. Warmth. Solid. Alive. Elias swallowed hard. Guess you didn't run after all." Ash's tail thumped weakly once. The heat pressed down harder as the hours dragged on. Elias lost track of time. The sun shifted. Shadows crawled. His thoughts drifted in and out like a faulty lantern. At times, he was back east, trees thick and green, air heavy with rain. He saw his wife standing in the doorway of their small house, her smile tired but real. He heard his daughter laughing, felt her small hand wrap around his finger. Then the memory shattered, replaced by the thunder of cannon fire, the screams of men dying in mud, and the long, empty silence that followed the war. Everyone else had gone home. Elias had come west instead. He'd told himself it was for work, for land, for a future, but the truth sat heavier than the bullet in his side. He had come because there was nothing left behind him. No house, no family, only ghosts that followed too closely when the nights grew quiet. A gust of hot wind swept across the plain, carrying sand and the distant smell of rain that would never reach this place. Elias coughed, dark red spattering his lips. His vision blurred. The vultures dipped lower now, confident. "So this is it," he whispered, unsure if he was speaking to Ash, to God, or to himself. "Sorry, boy. Shouldn't have dragged you this far." Ash lifted his head, ears twitching. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Not at Elias, but at something beyond him. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not the frantic rush of a man in a hurry, but the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Elias's heart kicked weakly. Panic flared, then faded just as quickly. He had nothing left to give. If it was the bandits returning, so be it. If it was death finally come to claim him, he was too tired to argue. A shadow fell across his face, blocking out the sun. Elias squinted upward, trying to focus. The figure stood tall, broad-shouldered, a rifle slung across his back. A wide-brimmed hat hid most of his face, but Elias caught a glimpse of dark eyes studying him. Not with cruelty, not with pity, but with something colder. Calculation. Ash snarled, pushing himself between Elias and the stranger. Easy, the man said quietly. His voice was low, accented, roughened by dust and smoke. He did not raise his weapon, did not reach for it either. Elias tried to speak. Nothing came out. The man crouched, close enough now that Elias could see the scar cutting through his beard, the sunburned skin, the worn leather of his boots. This was no settler, no soldier. Elias had seen wanted posters in enough towns to recognize the type. A bandit. The man's gaze flicked to Elias's wound, then to the broken rifle, then to the dead horse. He exhaled slowly, as if weighing an invisible scale. Ash snapped once a warning. The bandit extended a hand, not toward Elias, but toward the dog. Palm open. Empty. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ash's growl softened, just a fraction. Elias's vision dimmed at the edges. The last thing he felt was the dog's warmth pressed against him and the rough grip of hands lifting him from the ground. He had been certain he would die in that desert. He never imagined the man standing over him would be the one who refused to let him. Darkness crept in slowly, not like a curtain falling, but like water filling a glass. Steady, inevitable. Elias drifted in and out of it, caught between pain and nothingness. Sounds reached him first. The crackle of fire, the low murmur of wind passing over stone. Ash's breathing, close and familiar. He opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't understand where he was. The ground beneath him was hard, but no longer scorching. A faint orange glow flickered against nearby rocks, throwing long, trembling shadows. The night sky stretched wide above him, heavy with stars. Then the pain returned, sharp and insistent. Elias gasped and tried to sit up. His body rebelled immediately. A rough hand pressed firmly against his chest, pinning him back down. "Don't," a voice said. Calm, controlled. The same voice he'd heard before the darkness took him. Elias turned his head. The man sat across from him, feeding thin sticks into the fire. His hat lay beside him now, revealing dark hair pulled back at the neck. The firelight carved his face into hard angles, scarred, weathered, unreadable. Ash lay curled against Elias's side. The dog lifted his head at the sound of Elias's breathing, tail thumping weakly once before he settled again. "He's alive," Elias croaked. His throat felt like it had been scraped raw. The man glanced over. "So are you." "For now." Elias swallowed. He became acutely aware of the tight bandage wrapped around his ribs, stiff with dried blood. You stitched me." "Yes." "Why?" The man didn't answer right away. He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "You were going to die," he said finally. Didn't seem right to let the dog watch that happen. Elias let out a weak, humorless breath. "That's so." Ash lifted his head again, eyes fixed on the man. No growl this time, just watchfulness. Elias studied his surroundings. They were tucked into a shallow cut in the land, hidden from the open plain. His saddlebag sat nearby, lighter than before but not empty. His revolver lay within reach, unloaded, but there. "You could have taken everything," Elias said. The man met his gaze. "I took what I needed." That answer did nothing to ease Elias's tension. His mind raced, piecing together half-remembered warnings from saloons and supply stores. Bandits didn't save men. They robbed them. Sometimes worse. "What's your name?" Elias asked. The man hesitated, just a fraction too long. "Calder." Elias nodded, though the name carried weight. He had heard it before. Whispers. A man who struck fast and vanished. A ghost with a rifle. "And you?" Calder asked. "Does it matter?" Calder's eyes flicked to Ash. "Seems it does to him." "Elias." Silence settled between them, thick but not hostile. The fire cracked. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. Elias's strength faded quickly. His eyelids drooped despite his effort to stay alert. Sleep tugged at him like a tide. "Drink," Calder said, holding a canteen. Elias hesitated, then took it. The water was warm, but tasted like life. He handed it back with a nod. "Thanks." Calder inclined his head once. Sometime later, minutes or hours, Elias couldn't tell. The wind shifted. Clouds rolled in low and fast, swallowing the stars. A distant rumble echoed across the land. Rain. Calder stood abruptly, scanning the horizon. "We move." Elias frowned. "I can't ride." "You can walk," Calder said. Then, seeing Elias's expression, added some. The first drops fell hard and heavy, turning dust into mud. The storm came down fast, pounding the earth with sudden fury. Water rushed through the shallow cut they'd sheltered in, threatening to become a channel. Calder slung Elias's arm over his shoulder without ceremony. Elias bit back a cry as pain flared, but the grip was firm, steady. Ash stayed close, weaving between their legs. They hadn't gone far when the ground beneath them gave way. A surge of water swept past, nearly knocking Elias off his feet. Calder tightened his hold, bracing them both as the current rushed by. Ash yelped, his paws slipping. "Ash!" Elias shouted. Without hesitation, Calder released Elias long enough to grab the dog by the scruff, hauling him out of the rushing water. Elias stumbled but stayed upright, leaning hard against the rock wall until Calder returned Ash to the ground. For a moment, the three of them stood there, soaked and breathing hard. Calder met Elias's eyes. There was no triumph there, no expectation of gratitude, just a simple fact. He had acted. They found higher ground as the storm raged on, sheltering beneath a rock overhang. The rain fell in sheets, drumming against stone. Calder built another small fire, coaxing it to life despite the damp. Elias watched him work. Every movement was efficient, economical. A man who had learned the hard way how to survive when no one else would help. "Those men," Elias said quietly. "The ones who shot me." Calder didn't look up. "They'll be searching." "For you," Elias said. Calder finally met his gaze. "For both of us now." Elias leaned back against the stone, exhaustion dragging at his bones. He felt fear, real fear, but beneath it was something else, a strange, unsettling relief. He wasn't alone. As the storm passed and the night deepened, Ash crept closer to Calder, settling near the warmth of the fire. Calder noticed, but didn't move him away. Elias watched that small gesture more closely than anything else. Trust, he realized, didn't come with promises. It came with staying when leaving would be easier. The dawn broke cold and gray, slicing through the remnants of the storm with sharp, pale light. Mud clung to Elias's boots, and his ribs ached with every step, but he walked beside Calder, leaning on him when the ground tilted too steeply. Ash padded between them, silent but alert, nose to the wind. The desert was a different place after rain. Rivers swelled, gullies ran deep, and the air smelled of wet earth and iron. It was beautiful, almost cruelly so, considering the cost it had already demanded. Elias studied Calder as they moved. The man's silence was a shield, but the careful, measured way he scanned the horizon, the way his hands hovered near weapons that weren't drawn, betrayed a mind always calculating, always preparing. Elias tried to imagine Calder in another life, a life where he could have been something other than an outlaw, but the thought dissolved before it could take shape. The scars, the hardened jaw, the wary glance, it all told the story. "You've been running long," Elias said finally, testing the fragile barrier between them. His voice was raspy, but the words forced air into his lungs. "Seems like everyone wants a piece of you." Calder didn't answer, only kept his pace steady, eyes forward. Ash nudged Elias's leg, reminding him that words could wait. By midday, they had reached a narrow canyon, a natural choke point that forced any traveler to move slowly. Elias knew the terrain well enough to understand its advantages and dangers. It was the perfect place for an ambush. And sure enough, the faint clatter of boots and the harsh scrape of leather echoed from above. Elias froze. His hand went to the revolver at his hip, but Calder was faster. One firm press to his shoulder, and Elias's hand dropped. The signal was clear. Wait. From the rim of the canyon, 3 men appeared, rifles raised, faces painted with the arrogance of those who believe the world owes them obedience. They weren't the same men who had shot Elias, but the intent was obvious. Profit, revenge, death. Elias's heart pounded. He glanced at Calder. The bandit's eyes were dark, unreadable, but a small nod confirmed what Elias feared. There was no escape without a fight. The first shot cracked, and the canyon erupted. Dust flew. Ash barked and lunged at the nearest attacker, teeth flashing, paws sliding in mud. Elias fired blindly, each shot a prayer, each miss a gasp of frustration. Calder moved like shadow and storm combined. Every strike precise, every step calculated. He disarmed one man, ducked another's swing, and in a heartbeat, the fight became survival, not honor. Elias found himself beside Calder, watching the man fight with an almost ruthless efficiency. And yet, in the way Calder glanced at Ash mid-chaos, ensuring the dog's safety, Elias glimpsed something else, a strange, rough sort of honor. Not the law's honor, not society's, but something personal, something human. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. Two of the attackers lay groaning in the mud. The third had vanished into the trees, likely to fetch reinforcements. Elias's breathing was ragged, his hands shaking, and his side burned fiercely. Calder dropped beside him, eyes scanning the ridges. "You're tougher than you look," Calder said, his voice low, almost grudging. Elias coughed, blood flecking the corner of his mouth. "You better hope I am." The quiet that followed was tense, filled with the sounds of distant wind and dripping water. Elias realized he trusted Calder more than he had anyone in years. Not because he had to, but because the man had chosen to save him without explanation. Every wound stitched, every moment in the storm, every calculated move in battle had been a choice. Not necessity, choice. They moved again, slower now, each step a test of endurance. Elias found himself talking more than he had intended, about his past, about the war, about the family he had lost. Calder didn't respond much, but he listened, and listening, Elias realized, could be just as valuable as any counsel. By late afternoon, they came to a shallow creek. Calder knelt, cupping water in his hands, offering it first to Ash, then to Elias. The gesture, small and unspoken, sealed a fragile bond. Trust was no longer theoretical. It was shared, cemented in the quiet rhythms of survival. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, Elias allowed himself a fleeting thought. Maybe this man, this outlaw, this bandit, was not the enemy he had feared all along. Perhaps he was something more, something rare in a world that had offered him nothing but loss and betrayal. Above them, the ridge stirred. Elias tensed. Calder's hand went to the rifle. But before anyone could strike, a lone figure appeared, standing in the twilight. Silence fell. Not a word was spoken. Not a movement wasted. Elias's pulse raced. The figure turned, revealed a familiar face from the past, a reminder that danger was never far, that enemies wore many masks, and that survival required not just strength, but trust, cunning, and a willingness to see the world in shades of gray. Ash growled low. Calder's eyes narrowed. Elias clenched his jaw. They were far from safe, and the real challenge, one that would test not just their skill, but their very humanity, was only beginning. The air was thick with tension as dawn broke over the canyon, pale light filtering through the dust and shadows. Elias crouched low, mud clinging to his soaked clothes, ribs screaming with every shallow breath. Ash stood at his side, ears pricked, tail stiff, growling low at the ridge above. Calder moved beside him like a phantom, silent, calculating, every muscle coiled for action. The three of them formed a fragile unit, one forged not by friendship, but by necessity, survival, and the quiet understanding that each would not survive alone. From above, the bounty hunters descended in waves, rifles raised, faces twisted with certainty that death would be theirs to deliver. The canyon became a crucible, the narrow walls amplifying every sound, the scrape of boots, the snap of twigs, the low, warning growl of Ash. Elias felt a pulse of fear and adrenaline that made every nerve hum. He gripped his revolver tighter, ready to act, yet aware of Calder's gaze, unspoken instructions more potent than words. The first volley cracked. Dust exploded around them. Elias fired blindly, each shot echoing off stone. Ash lunged, teeth bared, targeting the nearest man with reckless courage. Calder moved like shadow and storm combined, striking with precision, disarming, dodging, each movement a testament to skill honed in lawless lands. The battle was chaos, violent and swift. Elias realized, with a mix of awe and terror, that Calder's ruthlessness was tempered by something deeper, a code only he understood. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting against stone. Elias ducked, rolled, and fired again, heart hammering in rhythm with Ash's rapid panting. Calder cut down one attacker with a brutal efficiency, then dragged another behind cover. Every glance Calder gave Ash reassured Elias that the dog's loyalty had not been misplaced. Together, they fought not as strangers, but as a single, desperate force. The fight ended almost as suddenly as it had begun. The attackers lay groaning, battered, some fleeing into the distant brush. Elias sagged against a boulder, chest heaving, mind reeling. Calder approached, wiping blood and mud from his hands without ceremony. "You're tougher than you look," he said, voice low, almost begrudging. Elias coughed, tasting iron on his tongue. "You'd better hope I am," he rasped, grimacing as pain tore through his side. Silence followed, thick but not hostile. Elias studied Calder, the hardened lines of his face, the way his eyes never left the horizon. Trust had been earned in small increments. A stitch here, a rescue there, a silent protection that spoke louder than words. They moved again, slower now, toward the creek winding through the canyon. Calder knelt, cupping water in his hands, offering it first to Ash, then to Elias. The simple gesture sealed a fragile bond. Trust was no longer theoretical. It was lived, shared in silence, in endurance, in survival. Elias drank deeply, savoring the cool life that flowed through his parched throat. As the sun began to sink behind the canyon walls, a new shadow appeared on the ridge above. Elias froze. Calder's hand went to his rifle. Ash growled low and steady. The lone figure that emerged was a reminder that danger was never far, that enemies could be everywhere, and that survival required more than strength. It required vigilance, cunning, and unwavering trust. The final confrontation came swiftly. Gunfire erupted, ricocheting off stone, shouts mixing with the staccato barking of Ash. Elias fought with desperate determination, protecting the dog, watching Calder move with lethal grace. They covered each other, anticipating movements, reading each other's intentions without a word. Blood, dust, and smoke filled the air. In the climax, Calder took a wound meant for Elias, dragging himself behind cover but still covering the younger man's escape. Elias, fueled by a surge of fury and fear, pressed on, Ash at his side, until the last threat fell, subdued or fled. The canyon was silent once more, except for their ragged breathing and the distant rustle of the wind. When it was over, Calder knelt beside the fire, leaning on a rock, eyes distant. Elias approached, supporting him with care. "You didn't have to save me," Elias said quietly. Calder shook his head. "I did. For him," he said, nodding to Ash. The bandit refused to go into town. He knew the law wouldn't forgive him. He left at dawn, disappearing into the hills, leaving Elias and Ash to walk toward the settlement. Before he vanished, he handed Elias a worn bandana, a token of their shared struggle. Elias watched the figure fade, understanding the cost of survival, the weight of trust, and the rare, quiet honor of a man who lived outside the law but chose humanity when it mattered most. Elias walked on, Ash at his side, carrying the scars of battle, the memories of loss, and the unspoken bond with a man who had saved their lives. The frontier stretched ahead, harsh and beautiful, full of danger and possibility. Call to action. If you were moved by Elias and Calder's story, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold Wild West tales. In a land where trust is rare and survival uncertain, remember, sometimes the unlikeliest hands offer the greatest hope.